Today, we are going to talk about adding injury to insult, and we're going to have Overreaction Sunday. But first, we are going to talk about, could there be a changing of the guard when it comes to the Baltimore Ravens? But first, Ravens fly. Let's fly. During Thursday's 27-20 defeat to the Kansas City Chiefs, there were not a lot of positives for the Baltimore Ravens. But one thing's for certain, two things for sure, Lamar Jackson showed out. But there was another in this game that possibly showed the Baltimore Ravens what is to come in the future. And if you watch the game, you undoubtedly know that it had to have been tight end Isiah Likely. Now, Isiah Likely had over 100 yards and a touchdown and displayed a Lamar Jackson type move where he stopped in front of the defender and just let him run by him and go in for the touchdown. And after Mark Andrews' injury last season, the Ravens got to see a little bit more of what Isiah Likely could do on the field when given the opportunity. So the question to me is, could this be a changing of the guard when it comes to tight end one for the Baltimore Ravens? I know everybody said Mark Andrews is top 3 tight end and not number 3. But in reality, Mark Andrews has not been one of the top 3 tight ends in the NFL for about 3 seasons now. Ever since his All-Pro year in 2021, Mark Andrews statistically has gone downhill. Now, whether it be through injury, through play, through quarterbacks being injured, season after season, his numbers has declined. And going into the first game of 2024, Mark had 2 targets, and that was about it. I know that they use him more for blocking, but sometimes watching Andrews run is a little painful. He does not look as fluid as he once did. Now, I know he just recently got into a car accident, so this may be a contributing factor. Who's to say? But Isiah Likely looks very dynamic. Now, when it comes to going downfield and getting open, Mark Andrews can do it with the best of them. But once he gets the ball, it's pretty much it. Isiah Likely, on the other hand, he has a little wiggle to him. And not to mention, he has a little bit of power as well, because I've seen him stiff arm a few guys into the ground. So with this performance, does this give Isiah Likely a little more playing time than expected? Does he move above Mark Andrews upon the depth chart? It is going to be an interesting thing to see during the season how they utilize the two if they bring them both in at the same time. Now, game 1 was a necessity because this offensive line isn't where it needs to be, and they need to do all the deception and all the chipping that they can do to kind of give Lamar time, even though this did not work. But as we see, outside of Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson doesn't have much to work with. Now, if Mark Andrews can come back and they can work these 2 tight ends effectively, this may be a positive for the Baltimore Ravens. But the way that it's looking right now, I say, you know what? Bump it. Just move Isiah Likely up to tight end 1. Use Mark Andrews sparingly as you can, and save him for the end of the season. Because even in Isiah's first few seasons in the NFL, he has accomplished something that Mark Andrews has not. And let's not forget, Mark Andrews has been a Baltimore Raven since 2018. And that one thing is, Isiah Likely has a playoff touchdown. For as great as Mark Andrews has been for the Ravens, for as much as we like to pump him up, when it comes to the postseason, he falls extremely short. Whereas in the postseason run last season, Isiah Likely showed up. So if we can save Mark Andrews for the long haul and then kind of deploy him during the playoffs, we'll see what happens. Because even last season, the offense was looking pretty good until Mark Andrews came back. And I'm not blaming Mark Andrews for what happened, but it could just be the utilization and how they try to work him into the framework of the offense. Or it could be Mark Andrews' tendency to freelance and do his own thing that messes up routes, puts him in the same position as other players. So as of right now, I think the Ravens should go forward with Isiah Likely as tight end 1. And next up, another thing that came out of the Baltimore Ravens game, which is not a positive, is the Baltimore Ravens lost edge rusher Kyle Van Noy for a period of time for the foreseeable future. Van Noy was injured, and you could see him laying on the ground. And I think he was saying something about his eye, and we come to find out he fractured his orbital bone. Now, this is not good news by any stretch of the imagination, because the Baltimore Ravens needed Van Noy in his pass rush, coming off of a career-high sacks last season, being the Ravens' second leading pass rusher. This is something that the Ravens needed, and something that will sorely be missed, because right now, even though David Ojabo had a sack, didn't see much of him afterwards. Then Odafe, Mr. Whiffs Owe, he gets close to the quarterback, but he just doesn't seem to bring him down. And Other than that, the rest of the edge doesn't seem too impressive. Now, the Ravens did draft Isiah Isaac coming out of Penn State to kind of help out with this pass rush, but that did not seem to work out as he has been hurt all offseason and he was ruled out of the first game with a hamstring injury. Don't know how long he's going to be out. So this may be the opportunity that the Ravens were looking for to go out and look for a pass rusher, even though they don't have a lot of money to spend on somebody. So now this is going to put a little bit more pressure on defensive coordinator Zach Orr, kind of come up with some schemes to compensate for the lack of their leading returning pass rusher from last season. Owe and Ojabo and Tavius Robinson are going to have to step up in his place, but luckily for the Ravens, they have the Las Vegas Raiders coming up, so this may be a reprieve. This may give the Ravens an extra week to get some things done. So we'll just wait and sit back and see if the Ravens stand pat and go with what they have, kind of like they did with the offensive line. But that will be another story for another day. And last but not least, we are going to do Overreaction Sunday since we played Thursday, and we're not going to do Overreaction Monday, but Overreaction Sunday. And in this week's Overreaction, I'm going to say, what did we tell you? Now, I understand that it has only been one game, so we can only speak about the first week of the season. But I think that we told you the Ravens should have gone after Saquon Barkley rather than Derrick Henry. And people said, well, the money. Well, if you look at the salary cap structure, Saquon Barkley costs less against the cap this season than does Derrick Henry. Make that make sense. Then we get into the actual gameplay on the first week. The Ravens played on Thursday night and the Eagles played on Friday night. In the first game, yes, Derrick Henry on the first drive of the game scored a touchdown. But for the remainder of the game, Derrick Henry rushed 13 times for 46 yards. And once again, I understand it's one game, but I'm going to give my reaction for the one game. Looking in at the Eagles playing against the Green Bay Packers, what did Saquon Barkley do, may you ask? Well, guess what? I'm about to tell you. Saquon Barkley had 24 rushes for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just when you thought that was it, he chipped in with 2 receptions for 23 yards and a touchdown. So yep, Saquon Barkley had the hat trick. While Derrick Henry was looking out there getting stopped at the line of scrimmage and kind of looked a little disjointed and lost in the pass game, Saquon Barkley was out there making it happen. And this is one of the reasons why we said the Ravens should sign Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift, or any of these other running backs outside of Derrick Henry. Because we all know historically the Ravens are a dominant run team with or without a great running back. But we did want to get a running back to take the carries away from Lamar Jackson, which did not happen in game 1. But we also said we need a running back that can catch the ball out of the backfield, one that will make sense, one that will make a difference in the game. So what happened in game 1? The Ravens had to take Derrick Henry out for long stretches of the game. They had to bring in Justice Hill to throw passes to him from out the backfield. Now, take nothing away from Justice Hill. He does what he does. But imagine Saquon Barkley catching those passes. What could he do? He is a much better route runner. He is a much better catcher. He is much better with the ball in his hands. Pause. So my Overreaction Sunday, which really isn't an overreaction, was the Ravens should have gone out and signed Saquon Barkley versus signing Derrick Henry. Now, I'm not saying that Derrick Henry is going to be a bust. I'm not saying that Derrick Henry isn't going to get his 1,000 yards, even though he looked a little slow. But when you have a running back like that, I honestly don't think that Todd Monken knows what to do with him. Because looking through that first game, he was not utilizing Derrick Henry right. With Saquon Barkley, there is no using him right. You deploy him as a weapon. Saquon Barkley can run any scheme, anytime, anywhere. He is that talented. And more importantly, he is younger. He's a younger back with less wear and tear, and he can catch passes out of the backfield. I think that is the most important thing. That is one thing that may haunt the Ravens going forward and throughout the season, maybe in the postseason, that they need that receiving type back. And when you put Justice Hill in the game, guess what teams are going to do later in the season? They're going to look for the passes out the backfield. Yes, we may run Justice Hill here and there, but they know he's coming in for the pass game. So now you can't disguise what you are going to do, because when Derrick Henry's in the game, teams aren't afraid of the Ravens passing the ball to him. They tried it a couple of times and Derrick Henry was just like, yo, this ain't what I do. This ain't me. Now, I can do it if I need to, but right now, this ain't the time. So I know that it is a little bit too late this season, but come next season, let's stop signing offensive players that are at the end or past their prime. Not saying Henry's past his prime, but let's stop signing older players that are at the end of their careers. Let's get some guys that we can build with that can stay here for a while. Give Lamar people to grow with that we know are talented. Didn't have to trade for him, so Eric DeCosta was not going to lose one of his beloved draft picks. Stop being cheap when it comes to the offensive side of the ball, because the way that this defense is looking this season, we may have to outscore teams, and that's nothing against Zach Orr, because it took Mike Macdonald a year to figure things out himself. So it may take a year for Zach Orr to get right or get where he's going to go. But in the meantime, we have to wait a year for this offensive line to get right. That don't sound too appealing. Oh well.
Nah, man, I'm cool.